Hey guys, it's your boy Shanus. By now, you guys have probably already seen the install video for the blow-off valve. If not, I'll link it down below or probably put a box somewhere over here. But this video is more of a recap of what to expect from that. For those of you that just want to hear what it sounds like, the clip is coming up. But stay afterward if you guys kind of want to hear sort of my review and just kind of little things that I noticed that I feel are kind of important to express. So let's get straight into the clips. Hey guys, I hope you like those clips as much as I did. It sounds awesome and I really love it. Now, one thing that I do want to touch base is just the general misconception and misinformation of blow-off valves and bypass valves. So I'm just going to give you a really brief explanation. A bypass valve, which is what's normally stock on the car, is a means to basically reuse the air in the system. So what happens is your turbo generates a certain amount of air, and not all of it obviously goes into the engine block for combustion. In the case of a bypass valve, the air, instead of obviously going into the engine, gets recirculated somehow back into the system to be reused at another moment in the engine cycle. The blow-off valve, kind of much like it sounds, does the exact opposite. All that extra air that's built up and created by the turbo gets vented out to the atmosphere and obviously doesn't get reused. Now, there's a lot of hate and a lot of misinformation regarding these things, just because every car is different, and they all have different functions. High horsepower builds usually have some sort of blow-off valve just because of the high PSI that the turbo systems create. I think one of the big reasons why you're going to see a lot of hate, and this is usually from like Subaru guys and even Evo guys and things like that, is because those cars operate under different situations. They utilize something called a MAF sensor, mass airflow, and basically what that is it's a sensor on the intake track that measures the air, and then obviously depending on the air that it measured at that point, it will generate enough fuel to combust properly. The problem with the blow-off valve in that situation is that at times some of that air is escaping out into the atmosphere with a blow-off valve when the engine already calculated for that air. And that obviously creates a really bad situation because you end up running a rich mixture where there's more fuel than air going into the combustion chamber. And it could obviously be dangerous because it causes knock and detonation. The beauty about the Veloster and a few of several other vehicles is that they use something called a map sensor. And basically, the way a map sensor works is that the air is basically calculated after the intake stream. So it kind of calculates what's actually going to go into the engine as opposed to what's coming into the intake stream. And that's kind of, in this case, blow-off valve wouldn't really do much harm or any negative effect because it's going to calculate the exact air that's coming in, and then it's going to obviously compensate with the appropriate amount of fuel. And that obviously allows you to run a blow-off valve because whatever excess air, it doesn't matter. It's going to calculate the air as it's coming in, not before it even makes it that far. So that's kind of clearing up that misconception. Now, again, there's still more misinformation about why would you do that. It's just dumb. It's an aesthetic look. It's just the sound. Yes and no. Obviously, on a stock vehicle, the bypass valve is more than sufficient usually because of the fact that whatever the car comes with is usually more or less correct. It's not something that you require because you're not doing a high horsepower build, and some people are even going to say you're not boosting enough to warrant a blow-off valve. However, the little Veloster actually boosts at 22 psi pound boost for that little small turbo. It's quite a bit, which is the reason why in the videos, even when I was shifting at 2000 RPM, you guys could instantly hear the blow-off sound, and I wasn't even going that far. There's a lot of pressure being built up there. So the biggest positive about having a blow-off valve installed on this is that if you watch the first video, the stock bypass valve has basically like a plastic diaphragm. It's really weak and it's known to leak out air. So that's kind of battle around. Whereas the new aftermarket model that I used uses uses a piston setup with spring more than likely, and it's sturdier and obviously it won't leak out air. So overall, you're maintaining boost. And should you modify it to allow more boost at a later point, it should be able to handle it more or less a little better, well, a lot better than the stock unit. So that also allows you for, varying degrees of modification. So that's, good news all around. Now, the quick explanation of why I chose it. Well, the main reason was obviously for performance gains and the fact that now the car holds boost a lot better than it used to, where I have boost, at least I feel, I haven't been able to measure because I don't have a boost gauge, but it does feel like I hold boost and attain boost a lot earlier than with the stock bypass valve. Number two, the biggest reason why I went with the TurboXS unit, and I kind of touched base on it before, was the fact that it fits on the stock, where the stock unit bolts up to. So it doesn't require any modification, as you guys saw. It was the easiest thing to attach. But number two, it's an overall better design than what comes stock. And three, it allowed me to not have to cut a hole in the bumper to fit a blow-off valve. Most other blow-off valves don't really necessarily require a lot of work. There's another one made by Forge Motorsports that bolts right up. But I have heard some stories that some people have had to, allow for access to it because it kind of bulges a bit. Other people say they haven't had that issue, so I get kind of mixed responses. But if you wanted to go with something else that's a lot more popular, like an HKS, a Greddy, or the Synops models, or all the other countless great blow-off valves out there, for the most part, you're gonna have to cut a good portion of the bumper if you plan on using the stock location. Now, for some of you out there that are kind of taking the step and going a little higher with your modifications and you're planning on doing a front mount intercooler, you can obviously relocate the blow-off valve location. They do sell plates that will seal off the location of the stock blow-off valve in place to have your blow-off valve more in line with the new front mount intercooler, or even some people usually like mount it on the intake stream going into the engine. So there's those varying options, and whatever works. The one that I will touch base on is there's one that people sell that goes on the cold pipe. I personally wouldn't recommend it. Only reason being is all the ones that I've seen, especially because both sides of that pipe, one's way bigger and one's way smaller, so they utilize usually rubber pipes and then just kind of a metal adapter with the blow-off valve in the middle. Blow-off valves sometimes can be a little heavy, so there's really no support besides two rubber hoses and that centerpiece. Personally, like I said, I wouldn't recommend it, but I've seen people do it. If there's a better way to accomplish that same feat, then by all means. But that's just my recommendation. I wouldn't want that job to be handled that way. So that's just it. The last thing that I wanted to touch base on is my personal experience in that after I did the modification, I noticed that on my mileage range indicator, I was losing about 3 miles per every mile driven distance. And I was kind of freaking out and I was paranoid. I talked to a good friend of mine and we kind of came to the conclusion that, one, obviously it's probably that I had a heavy foot, which a lot of you might experience because the first time you do it, you want to hear that blow off sound constantly, and it's just fun. But two, the other possibility is that because the stock unit was known to leak air out, and this one obviously holds boost, I'm probably getting more air in there earlier on, which obviously consumes more fuel. One of the things that I did do, though, that I recommend you guys do if you've run into the same problem, is basically make sure you guys you reset your indicator and have it start fresh. It looks like it's recalibrated back to normal for me. And like I said, it was just that was having kind of a little issue. I was looking at the fuel gauge, and the fuel gauge seemed to be giving me the exact same range per mileage, so nothing major. But as you can ask any one of my close friends, I was really tripped out about it for about 4 to 5 days straight. So they're not too happy with me. But those are just my experiences. Like I said, I love the product. I love how everything's turned out. It's an awesome mod that I personally do recommend. But the ultimate decision is up to you guys. Hopefully some of these things were informational for you guys and I was able to help you guys a bit. If you have any questions or any comments, feel free to state them down in the comments below and I'll, be sure to reply. But as always, guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Some people call me the space cowboy.
I'm recording, stop talking.
Oh, my bad.